Since our last Gen X video came out, Shana, one of our panelists, made coverage in both the New York Times and Reuters for her role as a single mother during the corona pandemic. See, there are moments when media does get it right and give Gen X the attention they deserve. We're going to continue to give them that attention, focusing on how Gen X raged against the machine. So, if you want more videos like this, join the conversation, subscribe to the channel, and ring that bell.
My perception of the 80s, and I was too young to remember, is kind of like that greed is good philosophy was like pervasive or more pervasive during that time. And I was wondering, I don't know if you guys were too young at that time. Was that like generally? And I think that this is probably a good topic to talk about in our neoliberalism discussion. But I feel like that's kind of like the motto of neoliberalism. Maybe, you know, greed is good. And I was wondering, is that like the sense that you guys got in the 80s, or even like after that? That was how the culture seemed to.
While they're thinking, I was in diapers, and I basically learned the lesson that I learned from the 80s was be yourself, you're special, say no to drugs. Yeah, so.
Okay. No drugs was big.
Yeah. I remember Money for Nothing and the Pet Shop Boys Opportunities, and there were songs like that reinforced that kind of attitude. But I just remember the 80s being fun.
Yeah. Me too.
Mm-hmm.
Me too.
Yeah, I didn't. I mean,
when the materialism degree came into me. The 80s was just cartoons, man.
Yeah, it was cartoons.
You know, I never really got into the designer clothes and the, you know, fancy car, whole thing of the 80s. And I don't know. I often wonder if it's maybe because, you know, I didn't grow up in an urban area, and so maybe that's why. But I mean, no one cared what kind of car you had. If it started, that was good. You know, that was good. You had a car that ran.
So you didn't try to look like Madonna, huh?
I just wonder if it's different for people who, you know, if it has to do, maybe not, I don't know, but if it has to do with, you know, the culture of the area that you grew up in.
Yeah, well, it's from New York, so it was very adjacent, and you could feel it. Sort of that competitiveness, and the guy who dies with the most toys wins kind of attitude. Wasn't there a movie, Other People's Money, or something like that, with Danny DeVito? Who dies with the most wins?
No, but I know about OPP.
Yeah, you know me.
Yeah.
It was materialistic, you know.
Other People's Money, 1991, with Danny DeVito and Gregory Peck and Penelope Ann Miller. Yeah.
So,
I mean,
but I want to say that
my parents.
What's that, Melody?
I remember that kind of thing being important to my parents, because my family, like in the early 80s, after the air traffic control strike, was super poor. You know, just super poor. My mom made our clothes. I mean, I've been wearing used clothes forever. And then my dad got it when he was out of work. He went and started selling like vacuum cleaners and digging ditches and doing whatever he could do to like get work. And he came across an opportunity to go in halfsies on a bar. And then all of a sudden we had a ton of money, and we moved to a new neighborhood. We had a big house, and it was just a huge, like, we're poor, and then we have money. So
and what year was that, would you say?
That was right around 1987, you know, the magic year, and that everything changed, you know. And it was so strange, because my mom and my sister and me, we still lived like we were poor. But my dad, it was like he was the only one who knew that we had money. So he was getting a Mercedes, he was buying my mom fur coats, and they were going on cruises. But my mom was still buying our clothes at thrift stores, and, you know, and feeding us like expired food, you know. So it was really odd. She always says, like, if expired food killed you, you guys would have been dead a long time ago. You know, so like, it was very strange. And but I do remember the materialism of it, because once we went into that richer neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
I started, and I remember being kind of a jerky, bratty kid, being like, why don't we have a pool? Why don't we have this? Why don't we have that? Why don't we have a golf cart? You know, and because we were around all these people that had that, you know, so it was like, I didn't know where we were supposed to be. It was very hard to form like an identity in all of that.
What was he still?
So do you guys as adults, do you care about designer labels and stuff, or no? You do or you don't? So.
Only because I'm a reseller.
What, Shana, you laugh? What's up with that?
I love black, white, and khaki. So the most designer I'm gonna get is like Banana Republic or the Gap. But as a mother of two very active children, as you can hear over here, I'm an Amazon freak. Socially, I know they're probably not the best people that I'm supposed to spend money with, but I have to do it for convenience and peace of mind.
And I feel like when in the late 90s, during our coming of age years, that's when the Fall in the Gap thing was in.
Oh, I love Gap. Yeah, this is Gap. Yeah.
The uniform came in.
Yeah.
That color
Those
scheme.
were big. I remember begging my mom for a pair of Guess jeans because all the popular girls had Guess jeans.
I never had a pair of Guess jeans.
Never.
Yeah.
I never did.
I was poor. Yeah. I got Gap clothes because I started to work at the Gap in high school.
I remember one year for my birthday, my dad gave me $100 bill. And that was huge deal, huge. I went to the mall and I was like, what am I going to buy? What am I going to buy? And I went to 579, if you remember that store in the mall,
Yes.
and bought one jacket, a little cropped denim jacket for $50. And he was so angry that I spent all that money in one place that he made me take it back.
So Bill Cosby didn't tell you to keep that.
My dad was John Wayne. You know.
Melody, I was curious because was your father still an air traffic controller at the time that things started getting better again?
No, he went on strike in the early 80s and he never went back.
Okay.
Reagan screwed him.
Yeah, because I was, and everybody talks about the strike and how big a deal it was, but I've never met somebody who was directly impacted. And I was curious too, because I was thinking, I wonder if her parents had a bad perception of Reagan at that point. But then when you were saying that things started getting a lot better around 87, it's like, well, did they attribute things getting better to the Reagan economy? And so, I mean, like, what was your perception about how they felt about like the strike and then how the economy was and him being able to, do well later in the decade?
I know that when they would talk, I even have it. I still have the T-shirt. My daddy works at Patco. I don't know if you remember. Patco was like one of the unions or something. But I remember when they would talk about the strike, there was a lot of bitterness. But it got real weird. Like once my dad got this bar and he came into money, my mom was a Democrat and my dad became a Republican. So like they never saw eye to eye ever again on politics.
After Patco, he became a Republican? Wow.
Well, because Republicans are always trying to protect their money. So now he has money. So like he's going for all the Republican like tax breaks and all these things that they do, protecting the estate tax and all that. So for him, he became a supporter of the Republicans because they were the rich dudes. And that's what he wanted to be.
How does he feel about how did he feel or how does he feel about unions now?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
How did growing up?
He's one of they're silenced. So like they never talk about anything, you know.
How did growing up in the Reagan and Clinton and first Bush era impact you guys? Did it leave an imprint on your politics today?
Oh yeah.
Who was like? What was like the first presidential?
You laugh. Yeah.
I laughed because I thought, as a very young adult, that Bill Clinton was the man, and we were sold that bill of goods that a saxophone playing president on a nightly talk show is where it's at, and then 25 years later, we're seeing some of the impact of his presidency, and that makes me sad that if I were old enough to have voted for him, I would have.
When did you guys like start developing like a political awareness and stuff?
1980.
Yeah.
I remember that.
I did about 1979 in 5th grade, reading my dad's Newsweeks.
A year ago.
A year ago?
Definitely
No, I
during the Reagan
remember my parents were devoted Democrats. And then the 1980 election, they were both so discouraged because of the recession and the economy, and they liked Carter very, very much. And I remember I was 10 at the time. The conversations they had very frequent, very thick conversations over the dinner table about who they were going to vote for and what they were going to do, and they were both so very, very discouraged. And I recall paying attention to that election specifically. They both voted for Reagan. Neither of them really wanted to, but they didn't know what else they could do. And that was sort of our introduction to everything that came from that point on.
I think the gas crisis combined with the Iran hostage thing.
Yeah.
I just saw those two. I remember being in these lines. I can't even imagine what the kids are experiencing now with the lockdowns, but you know, remember adults screaming at each other in the gas lines?
Yeah, I do.
And, it just seemed like the world was falling apart, and Carter, even my Democratic parents were upset with him. They didn't vote for Reagan, but they were upset.
So politics is going to get kind of pessimistic for us a little bit, but you know, our relationship with American politics has always been an acknowledgement of some type of oppression, and then them selling us some type of savior person to come along is going to clean it up. Sometimes it's your own people like Jesse Jackson, something like that, or Harvey Gantt. And then comes like what Shannon talked about, Bill Clinton, white man playing the saxophone, and his sunglasses with Arsenio Hall, and he's all cool and yo, it's gonna get better. And then it never was. And Reagan was really one of the ones, him and his administration, that pushed the war on drugs, and we became the face of that. We became the problem because we were using drugs as an economic system in our neighborhoods because we felt economically exploited. And so we, you know, indulged in something to try to survive, and then we're labeled, you know, bad because of it, and negativity. And like I said, with the Tupac thing and the movies that exploited us, our image, you know, you kind of paint that picture for all Black people.
Yep.
And so we're just like a problematic group of people within this country that's supposed to be free and powerful and economically sound and all this. And we're kind of like the, you know, the people you don't want to be around, the people you don't need. If we could just figure out a way to get rid of them. And Reagan represents a lot of that to us, the conservative, keep things the same type of president who was run by the Heritage Foundation, other organizations. So not to bring like the, you know, the negative to it, but that's just a real experience that we had, and it lasts, you know. Reagan's, I felt impacted by the Reagan, and then that's what kind of had me watching Bush 1. Then Clinton comes along, it does even worse, but you don't really know it because, like Shannon said, he's playing the saxophone, and then Bush number 2, and so on and so on. So Reagan just he's not a figure that we like. Reagan, Bush, or Clinton, we don't really rock with them anymore.
I wanted to say that they seemed so old. I mean, Reagan to me seemed like, because you know, my grandfather was actually younger than Reagan, and he every night before he went to sleep, he put his teeth in a glass next to the bed.
Oh yeah.
So this is my impression of Reagan, is like, oh, I guess he puts his teeth in a glass next to the bed, you know, when he goes to sleep. I thought he was just like a dinosaur, and then came his successor, who, you know, all I can remember is I think he threw up on, was it the Japanese prime minister?
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember that.
That's what he's known for. He briefly had this moment in the sun during the Gulf War where like everybody loved him. I think he had like 91% approval rate. Like I even loved him. You know, it was like watching the greatest movie we'd ever seen, you know, the Gulf War on CNN. But yeah,
Dana Carvey, not gonna bat, you know.
Yeah, well, we loved him doing that. But
remember when Bush was like, no new taxes?
Yeah.
I think it's like Bush or something.
Read my lips.
Or Clinton. Yeah, read my lips.
Bush,
read my lips.
Yeah.
Did the Cold War leave an impact on you guys?
Definitely.
The day after, there was a TV show called The Day After.
I was going to bring that up. The day after, yeah.
Oh my God, that had a huge impact. We talked about that for days in my high school afterwards. It was
okay. What? How did it make you feel?
It was very disturbing. disconcerting, made things seem more tenuous. It was very scary at the time. Like I said, I was a pro-Reagan Republican and believed in deterrence, and I could talk to you about the Russian SS-18 and how many warheads and how they were MIRVed, and that's kind of crap. But it was really serious business.
You think we're the first generation to grow up with the threat of nuclear war all the time, like from the almost birth on?
Does that make you? How does that make you feel today?
Yeah.
I mean, or do you still feel like you're where that threat? Do you still feel that worry?
I believe we live in the Matrix, so I don't care.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that.
I wanted to say one thing.
I remember sitting in like 6th grade science class, you know, in Catholic school, very clearly having the impression that there was no way I was even going to make it to 30, you know, because if both sides are sitting there with their finger on the button, just waiting, how long until there's even an accident, right? 99 red balloons. And so, you know, everything felt tenuous, geez, you know, from when I was old enough to understand.
Do you think that's why we were maybe a little more reckless in our lives than the generation before and the generation after, is because we never really thought we'd get that old?
Right.
Yeah.
I think we thought things were beyond our control, and there's nothing we can do.
I remember growing up constantly thinking, like, it doesn't matter, you know, preparing for stuff to happen in the future, especially like life insurance. And like I've put off finding out what a mortgage meant and all these adult things because I literally never thought I'd get there. You know, I just learned about mortgages last year. So like, and I'm 42. So, you know, I've really put it off a long time. But, and that's probably why I don't have kids either, because I'm really terrified of screwing somebody up, you know, really terrified. And I was married too. So I had to very, very carefully make sure that I didn't have kids no matter what, because I was not going to not have a child that I couldn't take care of. I was not going to have a child that, like, I didn't know what to tell them. I didn't know how to shape a mind, you know, and or be responsible for putting a screwed up person on the planet. So like, I don't know. I think we grew up in a very uncertain time, and that made us into very uncertain people.
I had, you know, we talked about this in the other one with the older Gen Zers Gen Xers, sorry. And, you know, the consensus was, yeah, we, you know, all kind of felt like it wasn't if we were going to die or the world was going to end, but when it was going to end. You know, it was just that feeling that, yeah, it's just kind of a given, right? We're going to get nuked or an asteroid's going to hit us. So
yeah.
Whatever, you know? And
at dawn.
And yeah, and I mentioned that to my son, who is, you know, one of the older Gen Zers, I guess. He's 21. And he said, well, my generation feels the same, but only it's climate change for us. And I just thought that was real interesting.
But
saving the Earth was a big deal when I was like 12, 13. I mean, that's when, you know, when We Are the World and, you know, Live Aid and all that kind of stuff. We were you know, the hippies had Woodstock, but we had, you know, Live Aid, Farm Aid. We had all we were the ones that were waking up to there's something wrong here that we need to fix.
So Melanie, this leads me to another question that I'm really curious to hear everybody's thoughts on this. Like you said, okay, so, you know, the silence had the civil rights movement. The boomers had, you know, the environmentalist movement and women's rights and what was the Gen X movement? Was there a Gen X movement?
Grunge.
Fight Club.
I would definitely say grunge. It's the one thing that it's the one thing that defined, you know, just a 10-year period of time. It changed everything, you know.
And what did the grunge movement symbolize? What did the movement mean? What, I mean, if you could describe it, just
It's like
besides.
it's the antithesis of prep. You know, it was the preppiness of the 80s birthed the antithesis, which was the grunge of the 90s.
So
it was
is
like
it,
you exchanged clean for dirty.
So is it like kind of like rebelling against the establishment, or is that what you would say was the Gen X movement?
Yeah, we're definitely a generation of rebels. That's for sure.
I would like to widen that to alternative in a way.
Yeah.
Because I felt like
including goth as well. Goth
the
industrial.
world of like 1990 was so overproduced with these sort of like overproduced pop songs and huge like the whole summer was about blockbuster movies. And then suddenly it was like, well, we're never gonna win at that game, so why don't I just record it on my 4-track and put out my own album and sell it out of the back of my car and travel around the country and build something by myself. And a lot of people actually made some significant amount of money doing that. I think it was Ani DeFranco was this sort of singer-songwriter too, who basically she built everything outside of the mainstream, and that no matter, like, even despite that, she still built this huge cult following around herself without, the support of like a major record and, commercials and, her own movie and things like that. So
doing things underground was a big thing in the 90s.
I'll do it myself.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
It's funny because when I think about it, it's not even fighting the system. Like for me, it was just the system can go, F itself. Right. It's not working for me. It's not, it's doing its own thing.
It felt very far away, and inaccessible.
And I think Strauss and Howe hit it on the head, where we just basically went off in our own little platoons, doing what we could and manage and control in our own little world, and put our into that rather than any larger movements generally.
I mean, it's interesting.
So did you say that the Gen X, instead of having protests in the streets, that the protests centered around the music?
Yeah, hip hop movement. I mean, I'm seeing so many similarities between grunge, punk, hip hop. Is like the music may sound different, but I feel like there's the same spirit.
There's a lot of anger, that came through. There was I think the beginning of the grunge era and all the music was kind of desperate. You know what I mean? Kind of the desperate songs, the sadness.
Right.
But then it turned into anger, and you got Rage Against the Machine, you got 9 Inch Nails, you got, you got all this angry music. I mean, it culminated in things like Atari Teenage Riot, and and it just the music got harder and harder, and the ideas. You came out with more music that was produced that could not be played on the radio because there was so much cussing. You know what I mean?
You had a.
We were neglected on so many different fronts. Like within that family dynamic, we felt, neglected. We were the latchkey kids. We were taking care of ourselves. We're on our own. And I think that translated to the music across the board. I agree. Grunge, rap, hip hop. I mean, everything said, yo. And then also to Michael's point, I'm going to do it my way. The system ain't working. I've seen your outcomes. That's not what I want for me. I'm going in a whole different direction. And I'm gonna let you know, I'm gonna do it. I'm a freestyle on. If you talk to me, I'm gonna blast you out though. Like if you call me on it, don't worry about what I'm doing, right? You never care from the get go. So just you over there, I'm over here, boom. With the added component of us being victimized, and targeted as the blame for a lot of things. Some of it's just, And I think everybody was hurting. I mean, not to put a negative spin on, but I think we were like the hurtful generation.
Yeah.
Well, and to build on Maarifa's point there, like I don't want to go backwards too far, but you asked about Reagan and about politics. I never, for the group that we all know each other in, it's kind of embarrassing because I am piss poor at politics. I couldn't care about Republicans. I couldn't care about Democrats. For a while when I was young, I was anti-abortion because, my family said I had to be. So that was, one thing. Then you go off to college with the hippies and you have to be something else. And eventually it's kind of like, I don't trust these guys. B, I don't really know what they're up to. C, they're, they say theories, but, whatever they're actually doing is going to be different than their theories. So, I'm just going to go live my life as well as I can and make sure that the people around me are happy and well taken care of, which is, your own family unit equivalent of, driving around selling your own mixtapes out of the back of your car.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the show Friends, which I didn't really watch much at the time because it was a little past me. I was more Cheers generation. But I think Friends kind of got it. The small platoon thing, what Michael just talked about. Your family, your friends, just what we can do in these small groups became very, very important, especially by the 90s.
Do you think that comes out of the high school cliquish sort of thing, just evolved into that, or?
I never thought about that, but could very well be.
I think we were always that. We were always that generation of people looking for a place to belong. And I think it just, as I had said earlier, we were clumsy about it in high school because teenagers and adolescents were they're just clumsy developmentally. We got into our 20s, it became more open. There are, a number of films, TV shows too, where you see people coming together. My connection's really bad. I'm not sure if you guys
can hear you. I got you.
We can hear you.
Perfect.
Yep.
Where people are coming together and it's just based on affection that you have for one another. And it's not rooted in anything superficial. I liked Friends. The first couple seasons of Friends, I remember liking very much. And my coworkers, we were all copy editors at the time, liked it very much. And it was because there wasn't anything that brought those people together other than just friendship and trust and mutual affection. And so I think that is a part of the Xer experience that sometimes gets overlooked. That we actually
and Seinfeld kind of had the same dynamics too, which was also on at the same time, I think, wasn't it?
I think so.
And Living Single.
Yes.
Yeah, Living Single.
No.
Everybody on Seinfeld is so selfish. I guess that is pretty indicative.
Well, I thought Seinfeld was more boomerish.
It's Jones or Boomerish, yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember my class being a fan of that show, though.
I love Seinfeld.
I think
I
they're
hated
both in
Friends.
the 90s. It just seems like I remember Friends came on after Seinfeld or something.
And I turned the TV.
Thursday night.
I didn't relate to Seinfeld either. I didn't like it.
So how do you feel the Xer role is in today's society? How will you guys be? This is almost a two-parter question. How do you think you guys will be remembered?
That is a different question.
Is it weird to say that it might be too early to tell? Because I keep thinking about what y'all are saying as far as what our generation has brought to the fold. I'm like, we're only like 30 years out. So I feel like maybe 20 more years we'll have a definite answer on what the Xers have brought to our society. I don't know. Or maybe I just don't know because I'm not looking at it.
I'm with you. I think that, yeah.
What do you feel that maybe it's hard to figure out your role in society because we still have baby boomers and the silent generation leaving their mark, and now the millennials on the other side, or
how about
boomers, or
you might get at that question by thinking about where we are sort of in work in society in our lives right at the moment, right? Because at my work, I lead a team of Millies. We've got a rack of fairly elder colleagues that we love and help set the clock on their VCRs. And, my organization's finally moving forward a little bit because we have, because honestly, we have a bunch of 40-somethings finally stepping into, senior positions. And it, if I try and think about that as what are Xers up to in today's world, being that bridge to push forward. I lost all eloquence there.
Yeah.
No, but I'm with you.
You're great.
It reminded me of something. I have a friend he's about 10 years older than me. And, he came into a company and he basically took over as manager and turned it around. And I said, well, how did you do that? He said, simple. I asked them, what sells and what doesn't. And we started to make more of what's sold and stopped making what doesn't. And, because so much of it before that was what the company's identity was about. It was about finding new customers for obsolete products that define the identity of the company. And, there is this sort of like no bullshit approach that he just came in is like, all right, well, what do people want to buy? I'll make that. He's not so emotionally attached to, let's say, whatever the brand of the company is or whatever they're doing. He's just in there to turn the business around. And I've seen that with the company I work for too, that I think actually all three of the senior management were born in 1969. So I mean, that's who's running the company, and they just turned everything around for the same principle, because they went from, this is the ideal, this is our perspective, let's say the more boomer constructed idea of the company, and turned it around, and what do people actually want to read about, that kind of thing. Which is worse or better than the other, but just the mentality is very different. It's done.
That's already.
Sherry, were you about to say something?
Well, what I was going to say was that sometimes I feel like there's people waiting in the wings going, when are Xers going to step up? When are they going to step up? When are they going to fix this? When are they going to make this better? And I don't know that the X generation, or really any nomad generation, that's not their personality. They're much more locally focused. They're focused on their communities. Their focus, as Justin said, on making a certain structure of an organization work, and making a business model work, making their families work, making whatever community organizations they're involved in, making those work. We're not a generation that really truly has the kind of hubris and confidence that's necessary to say, I can change the world. It's not going to happen. That's just not who we are. We don't believe it. And perhaps we're even a little bit suspicious of people who believe they can.
A lot.
Like, it's funny because just to jump off of what Sherry's saying, I'm sitting here when we asked the question, and I'm sitting here thinking, okay, so like Xers are 40-ish, maybe the slightly younger than 40, or all the way up to a little bit, in their 50s. And I'm telling you, by the time boomers were 40 years old, they could tell you what they had done, what their mark was on the world, without any question. Oh, boomers did this and boomers did that.
And on the other side, my cohorts, I feel like we were raised to change the world.
Right.
I think
it's funny when you said that, like the first thing I thought was, you're asking the wrong people. It's like, don't ask us to change the world or to save the world. We're like nihilists. We're just, it's anarchists. You know what I mean? We're not here to save the world. We're just here to get through it.
I think we're going to end up being the generational mortar, if you will, that keeps the.
Yeah.
That
Do you
keeps
think,
what?
I want to ask you guys something, because this is, we were the generation of punks and rebels and grunge kids and going against everything. Do you think that you've had to sell out a little bit of who you are just to get by in this world?
A little bit.
I think it would be a disappointment to that answer, because I don't know that I was ever all that much of a rebel. I was never a full-on nihilist. I was never a rebel. I was never a punker. I couldn't fall into any of those categories.
You weren't a follower.
I was just, I don't know how to answer that. Was I not a follower? I'm not so sure, as much as you see the environment as it's presented and you try to make life work within that environment. The environment's not going to change. Maybe that is nihilistic. I'm not so sure, but it's like,
cynical at least.
Cynicism is what we're very much cynics. Cynicism.
Where it's like, you control what you can. I can't change the environment. I can't change the thought process of an entire society. There's very, very little that I have control over.
Do you think we have guilt because of that?
That's a great question.
No.
I underlying pressure, like, man, I can't change anything. You know what I mean? That kind of attitude about it.
I think we are changing.
I was about to, and you can see it in the music. But I think we don't underestimate the music. I think the music has definitely spread a message. Maybe you guys aren't all out there protesting every single event, but the music definitely had a message. Even down to like TLC wearing a condom on the eye. I mean, there was still a message in the music.
It was.
Don't underestimate that.
Oh, for sure.
I think you need people in society. You need the big movements and the big ideas, but you also need people who are, keeping families together.
Mm-hmm. That's a message.
Trying to make sure that a company is actually working.
Right.
And functioning properly on all the little things. I I think we're vital for that.
Yeah.
That's, like I said, the mortar that keeps the bricks together. Otherwise, the whole dang thing falls apart.
I think we're very practical. You know what I mean? Like we seem to find less steps. To other people are like, oh well, if you want this, you got to do this, 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 and this, and we're like, no, we could skip that one. You know what I mean? We're, you know, I mean, like in my company, I'm a fixer. You know, we fix problems. You know, because we can see how to fix things.
Shana, did you have a?
Oh, I would. It was a couple, 3, 4 comments back. I'm not gonna lie, I forgot the exact words, but maybe I don't fit in the model for Generation X, but I think I agree with Sean the most in that my friends and my comrades and colleagues and I think we live our life the best way we know how, and that must mean something toward the greater good. I don't think that we have to have huge leaps and bounds or revolutions to have a revolution. Like what we're doing as the way we're existing and how we process our lives and how we apply what we learn is enough to keep it going. And I think I agree most with Sean as far as being the mortar of the whole process. But I don't even know, like I was telling Ryan, I was very hesitant to actually join this panel because I don't think I know a whole bunch of what y'all are talking about as far as like time periods. But at some point, don't we all end up being a little bit of who we're saying we're not? Like at some point, I feel like we're gonna fit all of these things just because of mere like maturation. Like
that was going to lead into my next question.
Oh,
who's been okay boomered?
I have, and I got pissed off.
Those dang kids.
Yeah, we definitely don't want to be the boomers, but I feel like to Gen Z, anybody over 30 has been.
I don't know about what I should say this on the podcast or what we're doing here, but I told him to kiss my slacker such and such. That's what I.
Well, my teenager, he does it more to my husband than he does to me, but yeah, we've been okay boomered all the time, and my husband gets a little offended, and I'm just like, okay, whatever, I'm an expert, and you can't offend me, kid.
Whatever.
So
whatever.
Does boomer mean? Boomer means like you're old. Is that what?
It means old now.
Out of touch.
Yeah.
Don't get it. You know.
Okay.
Millennials are now
in boomer, but I've been called a cougar.
Oh,
already.
okay.
There you go.
Not
Okay.
really. I'm only 40, and I have a very youthful face. So I don't understand why I got the cougar moniker sent to me already.
Yeah, boomer means old.
like
Millennial
she was
still
young.
means young, even though we're like millennials inching closer to 40, and in a few research terms. So
I'm gonna come from more of a, for lack of a better word, more of a revolutionary standpoint. My views are considered extreme. You know, it goes against what the American fabric is. So, and our circle, I don't think we look at it as we do like the boomer, Generation X type thing, but we do kind of look at it as kind of the Matrix. Since we talked about the Matrix, remember the second Matrix when Neo goes to the source, and the source says, "Listen, I'm paraphrasing. Neo, blah blah blah. We've already destroyed you in Zion 6 times prior. This will be the 7th time, my brother. Whatever you talking, we being there, singing, blah, blah, blah. It's going to happen, right? So my analysis, Ryan, you talking about your 4T analysis, my analysis from a revolutionary class. And when I say revolutionary class, I'm talking about those who have identified that things are wrong in this country. Things are not equal. There's no equity and all. And then that particular class, on the planet, that particular class realizes what's going on and now tries to organize. So they protest, and there's activism, and there's different things. But we don't see the realization of what we want. Sometimes it's because we don't necessarily know what we want and what it really looks like. Other times we do, and the system is just so strong and able to divide and conquer us and kind of dismantle us. So we're kind of like that different generation. We're part of that awakening body, realizes something wrong. We go to attack the source, and the source beats us. It destroys Zion. And I feel like this time, this particular cycle of revolutionary activist behavior, we're once again not realizing our dreams. We're not actually seeing what we want to see manifest. And I feel like this, not to be overly pessimistic, but we're kind of we're following the footsteps before. We didn't learn the lessons. And now, once again, we have an idea of what's right. We have that passion, and we're trying to make moves, but our moves are dated. The system is still strong. The Death Star still lives. And, you know, we haven't quite figured out how to beat beat Darth Vader. And we haven't figured it out. And that's how I feel.
I have to say something here.
Justin, yeah.
Just mentioning the Death Star and Darth Vader will date you with a younger crowd.
That's true. That's true.
Well, but this is beautiful.
I have no idea what you're
Try
talking
not to
about.
talk to
No,
them.
but this is good because when I think of Xers, I think of the Star Wars. My last point was the whole red pill, blue pill thing.
Mm-hmm.
Matrix.
Don't even get me started.
But when I think of Xers, I think of that question, and that question leads to worldview. I think a form of activism. It says so much, that one question.
Well, and you know, this goes with Maarifa's point though, but you know, what are we actually fighting for, and what are we actually hoping for? And I think that's, you know, before we started this, I was thinking, when somebody boomers you, what do we think of the boomers versus us in the 40s and 50s versus the kids behind us, right? And if I was going to think of a perfect world, or if I think of the fight that Maarifa is trying to fight, who are we fighting against, right? Is it a bunch of, middle-class people in bureaucratic jobs? Is it,
The machinery.
The deep state.
is it the machinery? Is it the machinery itself? I mean, when I start thinking about Maarifa's question, it's not even political. It's wealth-driven, and I don't know if you can. I don't know if we have a chance against that source. And in that environment, what do you do? Do you try and bring down the Death Star, or do you live out on planet Hoth in your stupid little farm, and have a decent life before they come and roast you?
I think we just play Han Solo's role. Because without him, it wouldn't get done.
Well, I have a
I think
question.
Rogue One.
Because I'm curious from the different responses.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of two movements in the last decade, and very different sides of the political aisle. And I'm wondering if you guys would say that either one of these was predominantly Xer, and one of them's the Tea Party, and one of them's Black Lives Matter. What do you think? Do you think that's
Tea Party seemed to be more boomer, much more laden. And also when I see X, I see the very early Xers, if you want to, these early 60s, the 60s tend to be very more Republican, and we're like trend. By the time you get to the end of us, 79, 81, somewhere around there, it tends to be a lot more Democrat. So I would say or liberal or what have you. So I'd say the Tea Party was, and a lot of the conservative groups today are dominated by boomers and very older Xers.
And I think you're right, because I think that, because I was born in 1965, so I'm right there in the 60s, Xers. I think the Tea Party is, yes, you have boomers, you do, but I think there's an awful lot of Xers that are showing up at those Tea Party rallies or the protests nowadays on the Capitol, steps or whatever.
But especially Jonesers.
Jonesers, that's yeah. So okay, so everybody else, you can join in. What do you think?
I'm just going to combine a couple of answers here. Michael was talking about how do you, I interpreted what you were saying was, how do you identify the enemy and what the cause is to the problems? And for me, my enemies are clear. And I'll say that before I get to that, Black Lives Matter is more millennial based, but millennial based and lacking historical analysis and knowledge of what's happened before, because they're kind of repeating the same old, that's never yielded results. So that's what I'll say.
That's not Xer, that's millennial.
No, I mean, that's millennial.
We had a millennial chat, and we basically came to that same conclusion, didn't we, Tommy?
Right.
It ended with us like, what are we fighting for?
Right.
and Black Lives Matter was started by 1981ers. So you see why, like, I agree with a lot of your cultural experience, but when we talk to activism, like millennials started the Black Lives Matter movement, it's like I have a leg in both. So that answers the initial question. I don't want to make it about me, but back to your point.
I got you.
Yeah.
And it's just, it can be an uncomfortable conversation because when we're talking about the enemies, the institutions in place, because I believe you were talking about how it's a lot of Xers taking on that Tea Party idea, even though it was a generation before them. And so to identify one particular enemy, Michael, I'm going to say it's the public and private school system that continues to teach. They say lynching starts in the classroom, and you start to transfer these ideas from the old into the new with the same old, and they use pop culture. So there's that media play, there's that institutional play, and people are developing the perspective to continue on the Tea Party doctrine, to continue on the Trump stuff, which is just a replay of stuff that's happened before. Again, the Matrix, when Neo comes to the source, it's the same thing over and over. And just to identify one enemy, I'll say the public school system. That's one.
Institutional.
Well, and I will say, having moved around a lot, the public school system definitely has issues. You know, clearly it's you buy your way into the best one by buying a nicer neighborhood. But living here in the South, and I am not bad-mouthing the South, I love it here. We've been here 8 years now. But the way that the private and public school system here works completely reifies, whatever racial disparities have been here for the last 30, 40 years. And as an individual, there's not a damn thing you can do about it, right? If you have kids, where do you put them, right? And every single parent plays that game. And so you end up with these two parallel school systems. They.
Are you saying
Another reason I didn't have kids?
You know what? And
it's a Southern problem?
In the South,
I see it clearly here.
I
think it's
also
everywhere in different ways, but here it's so crystal clear. It's deeply
it's especially pronounced.
I see very, very clearly that I hate to say this, and because here again, I do love the South. I think that there's a lot of really good things about the South. So I'm not trying to bash it or anything, but
speak your truth.
It's the charter school system is the new form of segregation. It is.
Oh yeah, clearly.
It is absolutely how they segregate.
But the issue, and that to me is going back to repeating some mistakes, because it's not the fact that we're separated, or even if we're in all the same class. That's not the problem.
Right.
The problem is the curriculum. Right. There is no cultural understanding and teaching going on.
Yes.
Like, you can spit that Black people are equal to white people, but if you don't show historically Black people's accomplishments, what we've contributed to civilization, how we formed our nations and organizations, if the only thing you learn about us is that we're slave, you can say and be nice, we're equal, we're in the same class, we're sharing the same resources. But historically, we're not, because you haven't shared what we have actually contributed to human civilization. And man, let me tell you, it's on, when you start getting that information, it is fire. And you start to find out, this whole thing is a game. So it's not the segregation part, whether we're separated or in the same classroom, that's fine. It's the curriculum. You have to teach the correct.
Well, except for in the town that I live in, we have 3 middle schools, and there's a really good one, and there's 2 really bad ones. And everyone knows that there's the white school, the Hispanic school, and the Black school. And guess which one's the really good one?
Shana?
The Jedi
I gotta
school.
say,
Shana and then Tommy.
I have to say, I love Maarifa's response in response to race and socioeconomic class. But my problem with public school curriculum, or school in general in America, is also the curriculum, but on a much larger scale. Just period. What are we teaching kids?
Right.
I feel like we're teaching kids, and myself included, the education I received, to be dumbed down, to not question almost anything to understand that every 3 or 4 months there's a holiday that you need to put, create a little mobile for, or, you have to go bring your mom home a little baggie full of stuff. Like, is that education or is that placation to make sure that we are the worker bees that they need in society? And I'm getting a little hype about it because, like, my kid, she's young, and I see the things that they bring from school, and especially when this corona stuff happened, and they're saying, I asked the teacher, I said, so basically there's only about 2 or 3 hours of actual learning that they're doing in school. And then when you look at the actual learning, the math is important, the grammar is important, these are things you need to learn, but the culture, what are we teaching Americans who come from everywhere, who to be, who they are, how they should interact with other humans across the world? I think we missed the mark years ago on that, and I don't think education in America will ever recover.
Are your kids still being taught to the test? Because my kids, that was their entire experience. Being taught to the test, the STAR test.
Right. It's a bunch of tests. My kids go to charter school. I hate school choice, by the way. I hate it. But they go to charter school because luckily we are zone 2. And if you're going to want a school, you want to have a good one, I guess. But I hate standardized tests. Every month I feel like they have a new standardized test. So we're teaching them how to take tests. Rich kids are taught, and not even through the fault of their own, but they're programmed on how to operate in these kinds of systems. Poor kids aren't being taught those strategies. So the curriculum as a whole, rich, poor, white, black, wherever you are, is lacking. We're teaching kids to be cubicle inhabitants. And
do you think the curriculum was better when you guys were in school?
No.
I think it took my parents.
It was different. It's kind of the opposite of what Shana's talking about. We had, in some cases, busing. We had remember Strauss and Howe got this perfectly. The open classroom and then new math. Oh my God. What
new
was
math
that all
about?
So it was kind of like the opposite, but it had its own set of problems.
I want to say something. I mean, like and maybe Ryan can help me out, is we went to art high schools. And so it's actually kind of made me angry because I wanted so badly to be a filmmaker. And when I went to an art school, they didn't have anything like that, because it was the 90s. The only people who could afford video cameras were rich people. And they didn't give them to their kids. So, and I look at this, a friend of mine that I graduated high school with in the same class, she's a teacher there now, and now they're teaching video editing, video production, filmmaking, screenwriting. And I'm so jealous
I can speak to
of
this
these
comment.
kids. I feel like, like I have to go get that information on my own, and they're just being given it.
Melody, I can
it's
speak
like
to this.
iPads for middle schoolers. It's like, we didn't have that.
Here's the generational line here. So you want to figure out the generational line? My class were among the first to partake in the digital age. So the first 2 years, I know your world, but by the time we graduated, we got all the new equipment, the new computers. We got those cameras.
And that was so the class of 2000 could get it though.
Yeah. But then we got the new buildings. Yeah. That was the goal.
The peripheral benefit of that.
Yeah, they were trying to hit that goal. Yes.
The thing that sucks is in the job market though. These are the people we have to compete with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We've been in the business for 20 years, and you've got little kids that were taught this stuff in high school, coming right into your world, making the same amount of money as you, doing the same job, and that shit sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks. I hate it. Makes me feel like I've wasted my life.
But you didn't. We did.
Right.
Everything you do in your life is to make you better, so to speak. I don't know if
you gotta get spiritual or you can't get through it.
Well, I mean, I'm in competition with no one except for myself. So when I see that I have to adapt, I mean, I'm a bartender by trade. That's what I do. I make drinks. I talk to a bunch of Generation Xers, and I probably love boomers because they make up 85% of my income. So I think you have to just figure out what you need to do for yourself to make yourself better. I mean, I might be optimistic on that, but it shouldn't be about what they had offered to them. It should be about what you can do, what you have readily available.
And I think that is a perfect summary of what Generation X has been doing.
This is beautiful,
Perfect.
guys. Yeah, I have nothing else to add. That I could end it.
I was gonna say, I just really quickly had to have to defend public education real quick, just play devil's advocate a little bit. I think that certainly, you know, there are so many ways that we can improve education, but I want to say, you know, I'm like, we also live in an environment where, you know, that for tens of thousands of years that humans have existed, most people, first we didn't even have a writing system, and then most people weren't ever literate. And, you know, we have a public education system that, you know, in the Western world that, you know, every single person is now pretty much becomes, you know, literate. And so, I mean, there's certainly so many ways that we can improve the public education system. But I think, like, there's certainly, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, like, public education is bad. It's like, it's like that. I'm sorry?
He said he did. We'll edit this. We'll edit this comment to the public school.
Yeah. And I was just gonna say too. I feel like what Maarifa was talking about. I feel like people are trying to address some of those issues, but I was also gonna say it also seems like there's a lot of pushback too, and that it's now become part of a culture war, another part of the culture war about you know, having diversity in what we're teaching, as opposed to just the standard white Western civilization history and all that. But I mean, like, I do think we're trying to make progress.
It's by design.
The whole history is written by the winners. You know, it's not what actually happened. And that's what I wish we would tell the kids. Is like, this is what is written down, but don't take that as fact.
But saying anything against what people were brought up to and taught, they're like, oh, this is they're making shit up. They're rewriting history to suit their political agenda. You know, rather than trying to make history as accurate as possible, you know. And I've had these arguments with people. They're like, they're trying to someone W.E.B. Du Bois had written a fictional story, and it was about a black man, but it used medieval tropes, and someone was arguing that, like, he was trying to insert black people into medieval Europe, like, in a way that wasn't accurate. And I was like, what are you? I was like, did you even read the book? I was like, what are you talking about? This took place in the 1900s. This didn't take place during medieval times. It just used medieval tropes. Like, but
it shows how easily things can be misinterpreted.
Yeah.
And I measure progress, because you mentioned how we're trying to make progress. I measure progress by what you're going to teach your kids.
Yeah.
And so if the kids are not being taught correctly a balanced education, especially in the area of history. History is power. It shapes your, you know, your group personality. It shapes relationships, power over or versus harmony with. Like, it shapes all of that. So if you're not teaching your child contributions from the Algonquin, Native American, contributions from the Hispanic population, contributions from the Black people, I mean, everyone, the Asian population, if you're not doing that in a correct context, not romanticizing, not boosting it up more than what it is, but a balanced approach. If you're not doing that and mixing it into your curriculum, then I already know what time it is. You can talk to me all day, Generation X here. We hear the talking, but you ain't saying nothing, right? Like, where it matters, And I'll just say this and I'm gonna be quiet. There's a fighting technique in the book called The Book of Five Rings. Anyone ever read The Book of Five Rings? It's a great book. I can't pronounce the Japanese author, but it's a great book. He talks about a technique called holding down the pillow. And holding down the pillow is when you have an opponent and you allow that opponent to hit you in certain places. And it's your job to make that person think that where you're being hit is actually affecting you. But at the same time you're doing that, you're stopping your opponent from actually doing real damage in places where you will be vulnerable and will receive damage. So you're playing that game. It's called holding down the pillow. And that's what they've been doing to us for so many different times. One of the reasons why when Neil goes to the source for the 7th time, he's like, listen, I already know what you're going to do. You're going to get beat. It's because they're using that technique against us. I don't know if y'all remember when Keith Scott got shot in Charlotte, North Carolina, we had an uprising here. And the first 2 nights of those uprisings, we were winning. And we were unplanned. We were like guerrilla warfare. They couldn't prepare for us. We were disrupting the peace, saying, if you don't give us justice, you're not going to have peace. And we had a whole thing.
I remember that.
But then those last 2 days, speaking on, what was it? I think Thursday, they emptied Uptown because we had taken over Uptown. They emptied Uptown. So now when we went there, we're still yelling. We're still protesting. We got our signs up, but there was no one there to listen. They kind of yielded us. Go ahead and have this. You think you're creating damage. You think you're doing something. But in the end of the day, you're not doing anything. We planned all this. And so that's what's happening. So to make progress, if I can make all these analogies make sense, to make progress, you have to teach a balanced curriculum to your children so that they don't grow up refurbishing the Tea Party, having to have another Black Lives Matter or look to the Black Panther Party. We wouldn't need that if the school system was teaching correctly. That's one component of it. That's all.
And making them interested.
Right, making them interested.
Maarifa, we're going to bring you back for the, there's going to be an episode just focused on activism and the impact of the Occupy, even just the Obama administration. I didn't even go to him. That's a whole different topic. But to sum this up, yes, I think every generation loves their kids, but something's different with Xers. I don't know what it is. It seems like it all goes back to the kids. I don't want to generalize and dismiss the boomer parenting, but just I really appreciate Xer parents.
Probably because our kids are still kids.
My parents criticized me for actually being flat out criticized me for being too involved in my children's lives.
Oh.
I'm too involved. I spend way too much of my time and energy, and that's why I'm not succeeding as much as they think I should. So that's it's funny that I'm actually getting that criticism from my war baby boomer parents.
I feel like if my kids aren't okay, then what's the point? What's the point of any of this?
Right.
You know, what else matters? Nothing else matters. That's kind of where I come from. And I don't know if that's how every parent feels, but or if it's an extra thing, but that's just, I mean, it's like, yeah, there's nothing else. What else is there?
Yeah. When we were talking about education, I didn't mean to rag them so bad. I love that my kids can go to school. But I do agree totally with what Maarifa said. Again, we're probably cut for a lot from the same cloth. But when I talk to parents who say, oh, they're not getting this at school and get this at school, I said, well, school is only a reinforcement. It's your job to be their teacher. You're there to educate. Things that people call extracurricular to me are not. These are things you have to do as part of being a well-rounded human being. And I think that's what parents are charged with. And maybe that's an extra thing, but I'm the same way. If my kids aren't okay, I'm not okay. I got to make sure they're okay and they're getting what they need to survive in this world.
That's probably why I flounder much more than the rest of you guys, because I ain't got no kids.
That doesn't mean you're not
I've only got myself.
It does kind of force you to get straight.
Yeah, you have kids and you are a totally different person overnight. So
you really
I wasn't willing to give that up.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah.
That's
it's
all
your
right.
life.
It's all right.
Not with the guys I was with. No way.
Well, we all make
They're
mistakes.
gone.
It's definitely the most fulfilling and at the exact same time the most terrifying thing in my whole life.
And heartbreaking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I had a friend tell me once, and I just said it last night with another conversation. You're only ever as happy as your saddest child.
Yep.
And and I don't know if that's dysfunctional and emotionally enmeshed and all of that, but I really feel that as
I love that
parent,
shit. Yeah.
that's about as high as I can go. And
I guarantee my parents never felt that.
I wanted to say something that I've had this experience that people have advised me that I'm almost like too overprotective of them, and I have like developed a sort of anxiety that, you know, they'll be fine. they'll manage on, I have to tell myself that, which seems to kind of be the inverse of the youth experience that we had, where there's
with you.
Of course they'll be fine, but I have to tell, remind myself that to sort of
and I think that for me, I just had to let go of the guilt of, when I had kids, before when I was pregnant or when my first child was born, I had this, I wanted to give them the Ozzie and Harriet childhood that I didn't have, and 20 some years down the road, yeah, I didn't accomplish that. If that was the goal, I failed miserably, because they were TV characters, and I'm just a person, and my husband, and we're all just human, and so, I think that you have to also, say, okay, maybe I did a few things wrong, but I did the best I possibly could, and I loved my kids, and that's, so yeah, you just, you got it. I think that extra parents can be overly critical of themselves.
Of ourselves. And this has come up when I've seen it, whether it was back on the forum years ago or on the current Fourth Turning page. And Amy, I think you and I have talked about this too. Woo, I feel myself about to cry. Hold on, compose myself. We will never, there is not a single living person right now who can criticize us as parents harder than we criticize ourselves. So, boomers can look down on us and say one sort of thing, and millies can look up at us and be like, you're doing all of this wrong, and the silence can say whatever. And it's like, no, I promise you, we are sitting here far harder on ourselves than anything you can possibly say. In fact, you just could with 10 criticisms, I've got 20 I could shoot out.
That's why I didn't have kids, because when I was married, my husband had a son, like little 5-year-old, and I heard my mother's voice come out of my mouth. And that's when I started. I was like, I need to go back and watch Claire Huxtable to learn how to be a good mom. And when I realized I was never going to be Claire Huxtable, I just decided to never be a mom.
Well, and this is where I do want to protect my parents a little bit. There were a lot of things I wanted to do differently. I think everybody has that. And one thing I've had to really come to terms with is my own children are going to grow up doing the same thing. They're going to be like, yeah, my parents did X, Y, Z amazingly, but I really want to change ABC. No matter how much my husband and I have thrown our souls into this, we're still going to screw something up. And to go back to something I said early on, that I had these parents who had really open boundaries about every topic and how much that horrified me. I've done the same thing to my kids, where it's like, no, we're going to talk about this right now. And you watch my kids, they're just melting. It's like,
yeah, it's funny because I made a mental list in my head, I guess, of all the things that my mother did wrong. And I was not going to be my mother. I was going to do this, and not, and now I look back, because I have a child who is in college, so he's already raised. I got another.
He's not raised.
Who's in high school. He's not raised, but he's we're getting closer. And I look back and I'm like, you know what? In the end, I kind of am my mom, but that's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's okay, because she wasn't that bad, really, and.
It's
so yeah,
science. Isn't it science? They raised us, so there's a pattern that's gonna be adopted at some point. You're not gonna be able to change everything.
Yeah.
And personalities get repeated after time. I can even see me and my 8-year-old now, how she talks and does certain things. And there, what I wanted to say in response, I think we were talking about being a bad mom or a good parent, bad parent. Guys, are your kids alive and they love you and they're fed and they're clothed and they care about you and you care about them? Can you feel all those things? Because if you do, you're not a bad parent.
That's right.
There's no way that you could say that you're doing a bad job when you're in charge of raising a human being who you can actually see the, the fruits of the labor. I could see if there was no relationship or there's a lot of negligence, but you don't seem like those kind of people. So I think you should, before you call yourself being bad or good, just be like, I'm glad that I could do this for another human being. It's a huge responsibility. There's nothing wrong with it. There's also nothing wrong with not having kids. It's your life. You can do with it what you will. So there's nothing wrong with that. Sorry, I just wanted to bring that up.
No, I agree. No, the point is that even if we are your parents, well, maybe that's not bad. I mean, maybe we were a little overcritical of them at times. So, so yeah. Because we all turned out okay, I think.
I feel like
I think so.
That was up to us.
This is the great part right here. This is amazing. This is
real
good.
fast. Did you expect this to turn out into like a therapy session? Because I feel like that's what's going on.
You know what? I've only had one.
I'm not talking. This is good.